Hi everyone, hope you guys are all having a great day today. In today's video, I'm going to cover the whole entire market in terms of Dow Jones, Nasdaq, and S&P 500, including the economic calendar. Now, I do post these videos up daily, so I encourage you to double check the latest video on my channel. So how we get the most up-to-date information. And before I get to the analysis portion, I'm going to go over the economic calendar. And for Monday, September 16th, 2024, at 8:30 a.m., we have Empire State Manufacturing Survey. And then Wednesday, mind you, so for September 18th, 2024, we have at 2 p.m. FOMC Fed interest rate decision coming out. Most likely it's going to be 25 basis points. From Jerome Powell's last statement, basically was indicating for the most part 25 basis points. And then from the latest inflation data that came out, the market was expecting either 25 or 50 basis points, but now has leaned more towards 80% chance that it's going to be 25 basis points. So you could argue the market was kind of more optimistic on that front, but once with the latest inflation data came out, they kind of dropped it down to 25 basis points versus, for the most part, 50-50 split of 25 versus 50. And then at 2:30 p.m. on that same day, Fed Chair Jerome Powell will have a press conference. And basically from when he stated as well, besides the fact that it's going to be most likely 25 basis points, essentially from what he stated, was that he sees it now as a time to have more rate cuts coming further down the line in terms of the future. Now, with that information, and technically indications are pointing to upside. If you are new to the channel, I tend to look at the MAC lines. So in terms of the 1 year chart right about here, here's the MAC line, indicates if we're in a bearish or bullish movement. I'm looking at ETF, SPY, ETF for the S&P 500, same thing, just different ratio. And technically you could expect more upside based off this. Now, but the 1 month, 3 month, and 6 month charts are kind of showing downside. So you could argue for the S&P, Nasdaq, and Dow Jones, all of them, 1 month, 3 month, 6 month are kind of showing downside. That Monday might be a down day, but because it's over the weekend, I tend to disregard those a little bit because anything could happen, so on and so forth. And for the 1 year chart for all three of them, it's indicating further upside. So for example, Nasdaq, I'm looking at ETF QQQ, same thing, just different ratio. Bullish movement crossed over. Dow Jones about to cross over, so potentially upside. The significance of where we're at with the news, so on and so forth, the levels of the charts and potentials here and there, is these MACD lines could potentially either fully break through the all-time highs or be disregarded and then start heading to the downside, because we might see a potential decent pullback, right? Not potential decent pullback, but nonetheless a pullback nonetheless, right? And the reason why I'm stating that is if you look at S&P 500, we're at all-time highs zone for the most part, so right about here. And if you zoom in, here was the all-time high back in July, and then in August, September, we tried to test it, could not pass it. Again, I'm looking at ETF SPY, ETF for S&P 500, and then we're once again really close, trying to pass that zone once again, right? And for the Dow Jones, essentially it's the exact same thing. All chart, all-time highs, right? 3 month chart, right about here. Here was the July as well. All S&P, Nasdaq, and Dow Jones created all-time highs in July of 2024. And then in August timeframe, September timeframe, tried to break it through. Did break through actually, created a new all-time high, but then got pulled back down as well with just the rest of the market. And now we're once again within that zone and trying to break through. And then the Nasdaq is the only one that's a little bit different. Now, before I get to the Nasdaq, one thing to note is with the upward trend resistance line dating back to 2010 for the SPY, ETF for S&P 500, we do technically have more room to grow to the upside, but there's been times where we're in the middle of the zone and we still get pulled down to the upward trend support level. Just mind you of that. Now, for the Nasdaq, like I stated, was essentially the same thing, upward trend resistance level dating back to 2010. We did break through it in 2020 to 2022, got back underneath it, had issues passing it once here, and then I'm going to zoom in and show you a little bit more details. So we had issues passing it back then, and then we got pulled up again. This is as of this year, by the way, not the 2020 to 2022. Created an all-time high like the rest of the market of July of 2024, and then came back underneath again with the upward trend resistance level of 2010. Might be a little bit difficult to see, I apologize because there's so many lines, but here's the line of the upward trend resistance level dating back to 2010, had issues passing it and got pulled down with the rest of the market as well. And now we're at a critical level somewhat, but the S&P, Dow Jones at our all-time highs, the Nasdaq is at a resistance level zone, but if it was at this zone right about here, which is the not all-time high, but 2010 upward trend resistance level, we've seen multiple times have issues passing, by the way. So this is clearly an upward trend resistance level multiple times, went up to it, got knocked down. Mind you, the market was still going up. Doesn't mean the market is not going up. It's still going up. It's just pretty much getting stuck underneath it. And you could argue that if it was within the zone, which is about $488, mind you, the QQQ ETF for Nasdaq closed at $475.34. If it was right about here, In my opinion, what might happen is if I'm looking at ETF, SPY, ETF for S&P 500, when we created all-time highs for July and we're having issues passing it once again, is that now with all of them being at the same level of critical level points, and then the Fed is going to be communicating if we're going to get 25, 50 basis points, which the market already is expecting 25 basis points. So I don't think that's going to be anything crazy. We could have like somewhat of a sell the news event where if Jerome Powell doesn't give anything as a major catalyst more to the upside, as in, for example, we're going to be seeing way more rate cuts than we were expecting to begin with, or there is not going to be a delay that maybe that could hinder the markets to get pulled up. Mind you, most of the times in the history, when the Fed starts cutting interest rates, the markets tend to go down in somewhat in the near future. So be mindful of that too. So just because the Fed's cutting interest rates, and then just because the interest rate is lower where companies could start borrowing money because they expect more returns versus the interest rates they're paying, therefore hiring more people and then growing the economy and so on and so forth. Just from based off history, there's been a lot of times where the Fed cuts interest rates and the market tends to go down. So with the S&P being at all-time high, the Dow Jones, zones, right? The zone, all-time high zone, and the Dow Jones being at the all-time high zone, and then the Nasdaq being close to the upward trend resistance line dating back to 2010, technically out of nowhere, regardless of the MAC lines, regardless of what the market is getting what it wants, we could start out of nowhere seeing a pull down to the downside, right? Now, this is a more riskier play. If you were to bet that the market's going to go down, it's a more riskier play because technically indications to the upside, again, based off the 1-year charts and the 5-year charts for the most part, but mainly 1-year chart and the market getting what it's want. And from what Jerome Powell stated in the last speech, that now is a time for rate cuts. So in a way, the market's getting what it's want. But again, it could be a sell the news event, or maybe the market was expecting way too much optimism and it's not getting everything it wants fully because, like I mentioned, the market was kind of somewhat expecting potentially 50 basis points being in play, but based off the latest inflation numbers, it pretty much seems like it got disappointed, and where it's settling on 25 basis points in terms of 80% of the market is expecting 25 basis points, right? So there's that. So hopefully, by the way, mind you, is in terms of anything could happen for the upside, again, indications more to the upside. The Fed could be giving a positive light, and then also the mega cap stocks. Be mindful of that because, for example, Nvidia is a mega cap stock, basically $3 trillion company. Tesla's a mega cap stock. If these stocks act favorably to the upside, and for example, we see a 15% jump in one day, these levels will get destroyed. And in terms of going to the upside, we'll break through them like nothing, potentially, if it's the right time, right? Like, for example, if we see on Monday trading day, which I'm not expecting, but if we see on Monday trading day 15% jump on Nvidia shares, then the Dow Jones and the Nasdaq or S&P and Dow Jones all-time high levels are just going to be broken, right? And then it could still be pulled down regardless later on, because if we break those levels, then the Nasdaq / QQQ ETF will be testing this 2010 level. So even though the S&P and Dow Jones are creating all-time highs, we'll still be at a critical level for the Nasdaq, which is the tech sector anyway, mainly. And then potentially we still get pulled down by Wednesday. So just be mindful, there is a chance for a pull down. We're at levels. It is a risk to bet on the pull down, but it's almost at a sweet spot, if that makes sense. But again, indications and all the data points are still pointing to more upside. Just be aware of that. So that's basically it for today's video. If you found it beneficial, consider dropping a like. It does help out the channel, so thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it. If you want to be notified when I do upload my next videos, consider following and subscribing so you're notified when I do upload them. And that's basically it. Thanks again for watching. Take care, and God bless and peace.